Thank you, Janet. So, here's what we're going to do. First of all, we're going to work. We're going to work really hard for an hour. And we're going to have a whole lot of fun for an hour, because work is fun. That's why you have a Rubik's Cube at your seat. Have you tried to actually work this Rubik's Cube? It looks like a Rubik's Cube. It's sort of, but it doesn't act like a Rubik's Cube. How many of you have already started to try to twist it? Okay? Well, I don't know, but that seems like a lot of quartz that I know. They look like quartz, but sometimes they're not quite functioning like we would like them to function. So the goal of a Rubik's Cube is to get everything lined up, I think. Okay? I've learned a lot about Rubik's Cubes in trying to put together our session today. And so you're supposed to line these things up, and that's an important word for us today, alignment. So let's pick apart just what we want to do in the title and then sort of set the stage for what we want to accomplish as we work together. We've broken the session into basically two sections. And I want to lay out for you something that you well know already, and that is the basic facts around what is court performance, and more particularly, what is high court performance. And as we'll see, that's based on some pretty generally recognized concepts, not only from the NACM core curriculum, but also from ICM courses. And we'll dive into that and hopefully just get barely wet, and then we'll hop back out. But we want to, with that foundation of what it is, what do we mean when we talk about court performance, we want to then engage on what does engagement mean. Now, this whole conference is about engagement. And it will take you to Thursday to pick up all of the tools, all of the knowledge that you need to really put into effect what we're talking about in this workshop. So what we're trying to do in this workshop is to build a basket of theory, if you will, so that you have that basket and you can put things that you learn as you walk through the workshop into it. Your basket's going to be full by the end of the week. So you're going to walk out of here with one or two things in your basket. If nothing else, you're going to have a fake little Rubik's Cube. I hope something more useful than that. But that's what we're all about in the 1 hour that we have. So it's pretty ambitious. Let's do it. So holding that, Rubik's Cube is sort of like a puzzle. Isn't court performance sort of like a puzzle? Aren't courts puzzles? Well, there's certainly bewilderments to everyone who doesn't work in a court, and sometimes I think they're bewilderment to those of us who have made a career in courts. So this notion of performance is basically unlocking and trying to figure out how are courts like puzzles. It isn't the old way of thinking that all we have to do is put the pieces together. That's a jigsaw puzzle. We're well beyond jigsaw puzzling. We're into this more dynamic puzzle where we have to align performance with what our people bring to that process. We have to focus more on people as a way of increasing productivity and performance in courts than working directly on the problem with no recognition of what the people bring to it. Now, when I talk about the people, whom are we talking about? Well, let's take a look at this. What we've done here, let me walk over here and get this regular, actually functioning Rubik's Cube. We've actually taken the Rubik's Cube and we sort of have laid it out on the table flat to see what it might reveal. And what it reveals is, first of all, a two-dimensional way of looking at courts as organizations that perform, that have a purpose. And it not only lays it out flat on a table in two dimensions, but as we look at those two dimensions, we can then start to focus in on this notion of engagement. When you engage, what are you engaging? You're engaging people, right? So I want you to look at the center of this Rubik's. It's not a cube any longer. It's sort of become a sphere, if you will. But that serves some purpose, I think, for what we're going to talk about. Here's the very center of that Rubik's Cube laid flat on the table. Performance. You see that? We're all about performance. We want our courts to be productive organizations. They need to be. But what's at the very center of that performance from this diagram? Can you read that? Our people. So that means the people that are in this room and all of the people that we work with. So there's the first really new thing to sort of put into our basket. It is that at the center of what courts do as organizations, at the center of court performance, the most important thing we bring is the people that are actually performing or not. And that's the whole reason for engagement. It's to try to figure out what people are bringing with them as employees, as citizens, as customers, as clients into the courthouse. Now, let's move beyond that to various labels or various levels of that Rubik's Cube. We start with our people, and then we go, follow with me, resources, further out, partners, and way out there on the edge, do you see that word justice? All right, so here's what I want you to try to imagine. I want you to imagine people in a court, and as we move out from that core function that we need to perform, that we need to produce, we start with our people, we go to the other folks that are involved in that, our partners. We move beyond that to this boundary of justice. And I think courts are a boundary of justice. Think about courts as organizations that hold society together through the administration of justice. If we want a just civil society, we do, then who ultimately, what organization ultimately is responsible for that? I'm not saying other organizations don't have a part in that responsibility, but courts, through their administration of justice, do in fact hold together society in a very meaningful way, at least society as we've defined it. So that ennobles the purpose of courts, and as a matter of fact, it ennobles what every single person does who works in a court. Does that make sense? Do you feel ennobled? Do you feel part of that valuable contribution to our society as an employee of a court? You should. And if we engage everyone in the courthouse, they should. And they will. That's the key. The key to unlocking performance is not the old way of planning, setting goals and objectives. The new way is, let's focus on our people. Let's engage them first. All right. So this makes a little sense, I hope. Now, there are some other words up here. If you follow with me, you see problem, effort, project, strategy. Those are just words, no matter what the problem, no matter what the project, no matter what the strategy. This approach that focuses on engagement of court people and beyond says, in order to accomplish anything meaningful or mindfully there, I think that we need to sort of look at people first. Maybe we look at people first, problems second, and we might have a little better understanding of what really constitutes court productivity. All right. So you all know court performance. You know what it is because you're performers. So this is really a list of characteristics, habits, functions that you already do. All we're doing here is reviewing it as sort of that first thing to put in that basket to make sure you carry it with you this week. And that is, we operate according to certain principles in a certain culture, the culture of the judiciary. We bring various perspectives into that operation, into court operations. We measure, measure, measure. Manage, 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 don't we? Have you heard the adage, let's see, how does it go? Manage what you measure, measure what you manage. Absolutely. So courts are all about measurement and management. They're all about looking at data, trying to improve court operations. So here's my completely loaded question. How well are we doing? Or no, let me load it even better, even more. Are we really performing at the level we wish to? No. Boy, that didn't take, you didn't have to think about that. Who said no? Don't admit it. But I think our performance isn't increasing perhaps to the point we would like it to be. I don't know if case flow and those kinds of principles, I don't know if some of the things that we're trying to do in courts, we are so wrapped up in the busyness of the court that we're losing that ability to really focus on what productivity looks like. And that's what we're trying to get at, but from this different angle of looking at and engaging individuals and bringing what they have to bring into the process that goes on within the courthouse. So these high-performance court characteristics are characteristics that we all operate under, and I think are very valid and very important. It's certainly true that generational change is bringing new expectations on the part of the workforce into our courthouses. And I think there are sessions this week that are going to talk about how do you take advantage of the wonderful characteristics to want to help and contribute to society that these generations coming into court work are bringing with them. And that's another goal of this notion of engagement. If you have millennial employees, or like millennial children, how do we challenge them? How do we allow them to make meaningful contribution to what is a traditionally bound, in some regard, organization like the judicial system? That's the challenge of engagement, I think. So there's a lot going on with human capital trends, and you'll see some of that this week as you go to a couple of the sessions. Leadership. How many of you in here are court leaders? Every hand up. Every hand. You're leaders by the fact that you're here and you're learning. That makes you, or starts to make you, a leader. And so if you're a leader in courts, these are the kind of characteristics or activities that you need to have and that you do have, I'm sure. Do you have a vision of what courts ought to be, what they look like in the future? Can you enthusiastically promote that? Can you share it? Can you lead others? Can you work not as a lone ranger, but as someone who's involved in a complex organization as a leader, and when it needs to be, as a follower? Do you focus on the customer? Do you have a customer focus? Do you share and talk with colleagues collegially? It's an interesting point to be able to have a collegial conversation with colleagues about problems in the courts. And so here are your habits as leaders and as high-performing courts. How many of these do you share? Can you read that list and tell me anything that resonates with you? Anything on there? Have you seen anything on there before? Tell me what. I know I'm standing in your way. Seeking clarity. What? Why? Yes, you need to understand to be able to perform. How do you get people to understand? You engage them. What else up here do you see that resonates with you? Oh, tell me about that. What do you think?
I think it's about identifying problems or barriers or opportunities and influencing others to take action. That's what I think that means.
Janet's going to hit you with the mic.
Oh.
First, it has to be on.
Don't literally hit.
Should engage you that way,
I don't even know how to turn it
but
on.
in the wrong way.
Is it on?
Turn it on? I don't think so.
Okay, so. Thank you. So I identified with raise necessity I perceive that to be having an awareness or an understanding of barriers or opportunities that should take action, that the court should take action on. So sometimes my coworkers lose the forest for the trees, and I try to say, here's an opportunity. Maybe we should look at this as an area to improve.
I really like that focus on opportunities because you never know when they're going to come, and an adept leader is going to be agile enough, right, to seize that opportunity and then to engage others in trying to develop that opportunity. Absolutely, great response. So these high performance habits are ones that you have or are developing, the ones that our courts have and ones that our courts need to continue to develop. All right, so that's the point. The first point for today is, do you understand what we mean by court performance? That was just a really whirlwind tour through some of those key words. And now Janet wants to sort of bridge over to, all right, how do we actually get people to do this? Janet?
Cyril mentioned the importance of people. In your courts, can you get anything done without calling upon others? You're shaking your head. No. So this section's going to take us back to engagement and specifically skills to help lead change, skills to help manage the change. We're going to walk you through a process called GROW. Ultimately, we want you to have skills so that you can twist your own Rubik's Cube of your challenges into a usable, focused way of solving your court performance or your court's problems. Here's one rendition of some of the partners you might have in your court environment. Do you see any familiar names? Call out some that are familiar. Clerk. What else? Superior Court clerk. Judges. Attorneys. This is arrayed in 3 categories. Those partners, helpers, collaborators, people we need to engage internally, typically court staff, clerks, others in our actual organization. Then there's partners, collaborators, the bar, the lawyers, law enforcement might be there, other government agencies. And then lastly, a lot of our work is done through what? What's at the bottom? Committees are us. Here's some other groups we need to remember to engage with. Statewide groups, bench bar committees, maybe even community committees. So we cannot do it alone. And when we're thinking about engagement, we need to start from internal with partners, collaborators, with groups and committees. You could even have another layer that ultimately says external partners too.
That reminds me of the Rubiks Cube when we laid it out. Remember, people at the center with right there, well, which people? And that sort of takes you through the layers of people, if you will.
So for engagement, we need to turn to people. Well, we need to have some skills for leading in the midst of all of it. Here is one list of some of those skills. These are things we've had training and familiarity with, right? But it's a reminder, we need to think as a system, think as a group. Communication is going to be important to engage, understanding, awareness, support, to establish the influence on the partners and manage the influence from the partners, right? Resiliency is up here. We also, as court leaders, need to remember we need to be nimble and resilient and flexible when we're doing this engagement thing, whether it's internal or external. We need to be agile. And probably most important, we need to be familiar with who are we? What is our style? What do we need to leverage in our style and our skills? Here's a list called Managing from the Sidelines. Not all of us can be in a leadership role, right? Although whenever I provide sessions, I say, I consider each and every one of us a leader in the courts. You may not be sitting in the lead chair. So using some of these traits to lead from the sidelines are helpful. Analyze. In other words, be familiar with what the challenge is, what's going on, what the path ahead of you may entail. Take initiative, have risk, take risk. Get feedback. That relates to engagement and the dealing with people. Work for the environment, but be realistic. And I like the last one here. Realize you may not be adored by everyone. So you just need to be familiar with it. That's going to be realistic, something you deal with. Here's some principles for leading through change. You should see some familiar concepts here too. Think about culture. Think about trust, what folks' mindsets are, people's accountability, courts' accountability. Again, the word resilient shows up on here. Don't let yourself be a tree that's blown down in the windstorm. Develop the skill to be pliable so you can pop right back up. Who in this session was at the NACA mid-year conference where we heard the Navy SEAL talking about his principles for leading change? Here they are. Very powerful. Let me ask now for your answers to this. What are some of your challenges in courts? Call them out to me and I'll repeat them. What are your challenges? Yes?
Getting through your docket.
Getting through the docket, handling the caseload. That's a good one. That's a second challenge, continuances. Real life, isn't it? Someone else, what are your challenges in courts?
Self-represented litigants.
Self-represented litigants? Yes? Comment back here? Judges accepting change. That's not a problem in courts. Judges accepting, how about anybody in the system accepting change?
Yes, staff.
Staff. Someone else, what's another challenge in your courts?
Cultural barriers.
Cultural barriers?
Time and attendance.
Time and attendance, oh my gosh, staff performance, right? Technology. These are all real life challenges you're dealing with. So how the heck are you going to latch on to high performance and all this great information about engagement when you have this giant challenge facing you?
Well, you know, Janet, what strikes me from all of the problems that you all shouted out is in their essentials, they're people problems. Okay? I think that's part of the message here. We've been attacking problems for a long time in courts. I think we do a really good job, but I'm not so sure we shouldn't be further along on some of those problems than we are. What is it that's keeping us from being further along on solving some of those problems, do you think? Making a decision? What else keeps us from being able to solve the problem? These problems haven't changed in 20 or 30 years.
Yeah,
Education?
not having the, like in my case, the cultural barrier. We had an African family, and they spoke, they're from, I think it was Mali, Africa.
Mali,
We couldn't find anybody to translate.
Interpreters.
Yeah, yeah, so
Okay,
that was
non-English
awful.
speaking, and the challenge that's bringing to the courts?
Collaboration between stakeholders, agreeing to what the.
Let me get the mic. Where's the mic?
That's a really good one.
Say it again, please.
Collaboration between stakeholders and agreeing to where where they want to see the change, because we can all do something to get there, and within our own organizations, identifying it to move forward.
So getting to the yes, we're having a problem figuring out the why and getting us to the yes. That's definitely an interaction sort of engagement issue, isn't it?
Everybody's comfortable of where they're at. They fear the change.
We had a great one over here. What was that again?
Leadership not being aware of what's happening on the ground, being too removed.
Leadership being too removed. Well, they're not truly leaders then, are they? In the way that we would like to see them be leaders. So that was a great list because, again, we need a new problem. We need a new approach to solving those problems if we're going to solve them. Do you want to be here in 20 or 30 years talking about the exact same problems in the exact same way? No. Well, some of us won't be, but some of you will be.
Cyril, your mic is off, so turn your mic on. But I'll pick up. Keeping your list of problems in mind, we want to now declare it's time for action. Let's have a methodology that you can use to devise your moves, to twist your Rubik's Cube to solve the problem. Here is a template we're offering. This is called GROW, Grow. It comes from a great book by a gentleman called Fine. The book is You Already Know How to Be Great. And you do already know how to be great. The challenge is, how do you twist and turn and solve the puzzle of court challenges and court performance? Here is one methodology we are sharing with you. Starting on this side over here, the first step is declare what your goal is. What do you want to accomplish? G, goal. Next, what's the reality? What's actually occurring to make this your goal? What's the problem? The next is, what are options, things you can consider? And the last, what is the way forward? What are the steps you can take to get your goal? By the way, all these slides are on the app. You can go get this after the fact, study it further, use it, share it with your engagement team. Here's this same concept laid out differently. G for goal. What do you want to accomplish? What do you want to improve? Is it implementation of technology? Is it judges' buy-in on something? Is it staff performance quality? What do you want to accomplish? R, reality. What is it you're experiencing? Poor performance? Pushback on change? Cultural resistance to operational enhancement? O, options. What are some things you can create as options, can consider, can investigate? In other words, what are the possibilities? And lastly, W, way forward. What are some things you can start doing? Where can you start? Do not have to be ginormous. What are some incremental things? Who helps you? Where do you start? This is GROW. Here's the chart again. We're asking you to think about using your problems that you had in mind. What is the goal? What do you want? What's the problem? Why do you want that goal? What are options? Some things you can actually do. And lastly, what can you actually start doing? We bring back up this chart that's, as Cyril says, the laid flat Rubik's Cube. You want to comment on this again,
Sure.
Cyril?
So you saw that a little bit earlier. We've added a little more detail to it. What detail have we added? Well, you'll notice we have specific tasks or places for specific tasks that are arrayed around our people first, our resources, all of those other folks that are our partners, ultimately to this notion of providing justice. And so we've done that, and we've said if we start with people and go through that process, perhaps we'll have a more implementable, is that a word? Implementable kind of strategy or plan to attack some of the problems that continue to develop and plague us. All right, so we've also added just these perspectives that are important to consider in looking at any issue facing the courts. And you've probably have heard these before, but we like to look at what courts do, particularly when we're around making improvements in court performance. We like to look at those problems from the perspective of the customer, internal operations, what can we do in an innovative way, and what social value can we add or bring to our communities in doing that. I do not know of organizations more adept at doing a lot with a little than courts. And if we have been able to figure that out, we can figure this out. We can figure out how, in talking to our people about a particular problem and having them consider that problem from the perspective of court users, what do we need to do? Don't you think? Do you agree with that? That we can figure this out? Absolutely. Okay, so all we've done is taken the Rubik's Cube and stretched it out and put tasks, and you can tell where we're going with this. Where do you think we're going with this? Janet, what's the next slide?
We're going to some actual work that we want you to do. This combines the concept of the layers of the Rubik's Cube with the GROW methodology. You each have a worksheet. This is where we want you to take that worksheet and, working individually, walk yourself through it, starting with, what is your goal? What's the thing you want to change? Let's look at the very top of this sheet. There's a list up there that says, Step 1, commit publicly. In other words, get it out of your brain and get it on paper. Put it in writing. Share it, discuss it, record it. Step 2, create a plan. This document, this worksheet's going to help you with that plan. Step 3, get support. Engagement. Who's going to have to help you? Step 4, set milestones, timelines, goals. Set chunks. Chunk this out into stages if it helps you solve your problem. So on this chart, you should see along the left-hand column, GROW. We have those 4 stages there. G for step 1. What's the goal? What do you want changed? We're asking you, working individually, to think about something in your real work world that you want to practice with. Write it down. Step 2, R, break it into sub-goals. This is where you might begin defining what is the reality, what's the problem you are facing. Is it staff morale? Is it absenteeism? What is it? Oh, step 3, start to detail what you want to do. And we've got this arrayed under, you can list some actual actions and who, what, when. Who's got to help you? Who's got to participate with you? Then the bottom part of this W, step 4, begin to write out your plan. For example, if it is the first Monday of the month, I'm going to publish the continuance statistics for the court and disseminate it to our management team. Or, for example, if we just had the employee satisfaction survey done and we now have the data, if we have that data in hand, I'm going to set a management team meeting so we can review it. You're saying, if this, I'm going to do that. This is practice. Use your real-world court example and fill out this form going through these levels and these phases. This is your version of trying to solve the Rubik's Cube challenge in your court. I'm going to give you about 5 or so minutes working individually to walk through this. I'll check your status, and then we'll see what you've come up with. So take some real problem in your court and use this worksheet to go through it.
And before we actually turn you loose with 3, 2, 1, go, what's the difference between this and any other action planning exercise you've ever done? And I know everyone in here has gone to workshop after workshop, at the end of which there's always an action planning session. Here's what generally walks out of those sessions. You have a couple of things on paper. They usually are labeled goals and objectives. There's usually who's going to do what, by what time. You walk home, it goes on that shelf. It's been a great little exercise. That is not what this is. This is through the lens of engagement. Now, it may be unfair on day one of a multiple day conference about engagement to ask you to do this, but we're going to do it anyhow. We want you to think about exactly what you would do and really be mindful, that's a new word, purposeful about this. So this is an engagement plan, if that makes sense at any level. That's the difference here. Does that make sense to you, what we're asking you to do? It's sort of like closing your eyes, feet on the floor, thinking about your breathing for a couple of minutes. It's now sort of feet on the floor, seat belt fastened. What are you going to say exactly, and to whom, about what, related to a problem that you've identified? Okay.
Using your real world problem, walk yourself through this sheet and fill in as much as you can on each of these areas of this form.
So now it's 3, 2, 1,
Go.
Go.
We do have extra sheets. Do you need some?
Yes.
I would also remind you this form is in the app. You could go back and reprint and print and share and practice with it. Anyone else need extra?
If you have a question, just yell it out. Raise a hand. We'll come.
How about one more minute, and then we'll ask you to begin sharing. What I'd like you to do now is to turn to the person beside you or behind you or in small groups of 3. Share with your partner. What did you write down there? What's your goal? What's your reality? What are some of the options? And what are you going to do? Turn to your partner in front of you, beside you, behind you, and share with your partner. What did you write?
How are you, Janet?
Yeah. Tired, how are you?
I'm fine. I wish we had half a day.
Well, this would be a good class with several layers of doing it instead of just quick dive in and come back
It
out.
would be so good.
Okay, so when I call them back together, I'm just going to make a comment that we admittedly thrust them in quickly, but we still want them to share what they come up with. Then I'll turn it back to you.
Okay.
I'm going to see if she can get the mic.
Okay. You know, court people are great, given the opportunity to sit and talk and share and develop.
Yeah.
It's just so many of these great ideas hit the wall and just sort of fall down at the bottom.
And then people trample all over them.
Yeah.
Okay, let's come back together if we can as a full class. Now, admittedly, we thrust you into this. And admittedly, you are diving into this with not a lot of time to work through the phases and the steps. But we wanted to expose you to this tool and this technique. We'd now like you to share what you've come up with. And Cyril has a masterful methodology.
Well, I don't know how masterful it is. Let's see how well it works, okay? If you have a Rubik's Cube with a little star on it, you are a special star today. So we won't go in order. See that? You thought I might go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? But if you have a Rubik's Cube with a star, just raise your hand. Where's one? All right, so we're going to exchange the Rubik's Cube with a star with a real keychain Rubik's Cube. Okay. All right, but the string is you got to tell us something from your sheet that you actually, okay? Tell us what you wrote, or a little bit of it.
Okay, as far as a goal, we're in the process of implementing a civil justice reform in our civil courtrooms. We're having some issues with pushback. Some of the judges are completely engaged. Some of the judges are completely disengaged, and this is a solution in search of a problem.
Very good.
So one of the things, when we start talking about goals, why do we want to do this? We want to reduce costs, we want to reduce delay, we want to improve outcomes.
Did everyone hear that? That civil justice reform movement is great, but it's going to come down to specific conversations with specific people, right? About specifics.
Absolutely.
Absolutely right. Very good for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Next star of the day. All right. Keychain for star. Thank you.
Thank you.
What did you write?
Okay, in the courts we have county funded and state funded employees, and I work in human resources. And one of the things that our county funded employees, we have a 320 rule for them, 320 vacation hours. Actually, it's the Board of County Commissioners. Once they have reached 320 vacation hours, anything in excess of that, when their anniversary date falls around, is forfeited. So we constantly have employees contacting us saying, oh, I lost, 100 hours of vacation time, which is very significant. Yes. So one of the goals would be to make sure that the employee, first of all, understand the definition of the anniversary date, because some of them don't know it's simply their hire date, but they just don't know that. Another goal is to make sure that the employee knows what that date is, because under certain circumstances, if they take leave without pay in excess of 30 days, that anniversary date can kind of float. So we'll need to keep them abreast of that. And also make sure our full HR team understands the employee's anniversary date and when that will float. So when the employee calls, they can receive the correct information on their anniversary date. And that action mainly falls on me. To notify the employees, basically, even a little clearer during their orientation, a new employee orientation, and to make sure that they know the date, the definition, and the hire date, the definition and the anniversary date are one and the same. An action that I'll need to do is to make sure that I print a report months in advance so that anyone encroaching upon that 320, I can let them know far enough in advance so they can bring those balances down. And if I don't do it, then I will definitely reassign it. And actually, another plan I'm going to do is train someone else to do it.
There you go. Boy, I don't know what you could do in a day of work on that. You did that in 5 minutes. That's awesome. Thank you. Next.
All right, good morning. My project was revising an office procedure manual. We have a talented small staff, but the rest of us need to know what the others are doing, so that if that proverbial bus crosses the intersection too fast. So we're going to revise the procedure manual. Of course, we've got to, start at the beginning and identify the tasks that each of our staff do. So we're just going to start by having them make an entire list, then get together, make sure we don't have any overlap, and then kind of divide and conquer, letting people who do specific work write the procedure, and then go through the proofing process and publishing. So I just had a few broad strokes in the 5 minutes.
No, that's great. I mean, I think the beauty of this approach is that it does allow you to get a lot done in a little amount of time. And if you really had some devoted time to it, you'd be able to really, flesh this out really well, I think. It's a really interesting move by growing. I love it. Thank you. Next.
Well, mine was very similar to hers, but it consisted more of restructure of our court administrative duties in our office and implementing mandatory cross-training. The issue we come across a lot is we don't have time to cross-train each other. So if I'm out or if my coworker's out, if we're on vacation, if we're at a conference, what we wind up doing is working from home, taking our computers with us. And some of the loads are a little heavier on some employees than others. I think what we need to do is kind of develop a flow chart and a checklist and go through and see who's carrying what weight around the office and where we could improve and where we could help each other out.
That's really great. I mean, I remember, trying to think this through back in my office. And here's what you have to write on a piece of paper and keep it in front of you. As you do these things, as you plan and then execute,
Right.
people first, people first, people first. Your people first. Okay? Next.
Good morning.
Good morning.
One of my goals is to communicate more effectively with the judges' staff because we have started e-filing and working on Odyssey, and normally they will come down and get files and review the files before we have it. I work with adoptions and appeals in Superior Court. And normally they will come down and get the files, review the files, but now they don't have to do that anymore because we work through Odyssey. They can view everything on Odyssey. They don't have to leave their desk. And they still have a tendency to come down and get the file. And we're trying to get away from that because we're going paperless, no files now. So they will have to view Odyssey and look at Odyssey for everything. And so now we're trying to communicate with them with emails saying that you don't have to come down. It's on Odyssey. Everything is e-filed, et cetera, et cetera. So trying to communicate with them on that.
I heard the word communicate several times in 60 seconds, right? And engagement is communication, and communication is engagement. I think we've been pretty good at communicating, well, maybe not, but we need to do better. And I think we can do better if we think of communication as a way of effective engagement with folks, judges particularly. All right, so thank you all. Did I get every star? Because I have an extra keychain.
That one must be for me.
That must be, absolutely.
Angela gets a keychain.
Angela. All right. So like Janet said, totally unfair to expect you to master this grow, to move and grow in the few minutes that we've had together. The point here has been to marry together this notion of court performance, in which we have a lot of experience, and this notion of engagement, in which we have less, to see if we can't figure out how to better engage and use our people, to use ourselves and what they bring. So I need a clicker, Janet.
There you go.
There we go.
Now, regarding this form, wouldn't it be interesting if you could take this form and this sequence of actions and share it with your work group, your staff, your team. It might go a long way building on what you experienced today on how to do problem solving.
Right.
That's all this is, solving a problem. Cyril.
So, which of these are you? Well, crying isn't up here, so crying isn't allowed. Engagement, all right, so react. If you think this is hard, working the Rubik's Cube puzzle and relating it to courts, watch this. Now, you saw 15 seconds of a 30-minute video. He did that for 30 minutes. A young man juggled 3 Rubik's Cubes, and he solved them while they were being juggled by simply twisting them as they hit his hand before he passed them off in the juggle. All right, so who's up for the challenge? I have some Rubik's Cubes. So, yes, this isn't easy. We don't pretend that it's easy. We just promote or say that we need to get started on it. We need to talk to people. We need to communicate. We need to engage people. You're going to learn a lot about that as you go through other sessions. Pull as much together about engagement and put it in this basket and go back and print these slides or look at the slides from this presentation and use it as a checklist to sort of bring those bring a harmony, if you will, to the various presentations that you see this week.
And I would add, the whole idea of the Rubik's Cube concept for people that master it is to have focus, to have a sequence of moves they know to go to solve the problem. That's what we wanted
great.
you to experience today. The sequence of moves to solve the puzzle.
And here's a cheat sheet if you need it. Okay? We're out of time,
Thank you for being with us.
unfortunately.
Thanks to Angela.
Thank you, Angela.
Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.